Welcome to Keeping Your Shit Together in a Stressed World with Michelle Post and Scott Grossberg. Each week, we explore down and dirty ways to stop awfulizing, catastrophizing, going down the rabbit hole, and moving through all the craziness that is happening right now. We're here to create a community of like-minded people as we give you tips, tricks, and techniques for keeping sane in an unhinged world. And now, here are your hosts, Michelle Post and Scott Grossberg.
Greetings, everybody. This is Scott Grossberg, one of your co-hosts for the podcast, Keeping Your Shit Together in a Stressed World. And boy, is it. And I'm here with my podcast host, Michelle Post. Hey, Michelle.
Hi, Scott. Hello, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.
And we are actually joined by our featured guest, Christine Phillip.
Yay.
Ordinarily, we would bring her in later into the show, but we're going to actually have a pretty candid, raw, irreverent discussion right now.
Yeah, because there's a lot going on in our world. So we're recording this on February 28th, 2022, for those of you that find this episode far off into the future. And a lot is going on in our world right now between Ukraine and Russia. And we started talking about our connections and history offline about this and how we're all sort of feeling about what's happening in the world and dealing with the stress of knowing that a part of the world is in such distress and it's affecting so many countries involved in NATO. So we just thought we'd have a dialogue about what's been happening personally or professionally for us as we kind of deal with another impending huge conflict, current conflict, and then depending on how the world reacts to it, World War III could be World War III.
You know, and a lot of this started, I had broached the subject when Michelle and I meet offline, and we plan the show and we talk about different subjects that we can do. And one of the things that I had opined, one of the things that I kind of viewed was, I grew up in a family that was in the military. My dad was in the Korean War. Some very dear loved family members were in World War II. I grew up hearing about those, the Vietnam conflict. We called it a war back when I was a kid. The Vietnam War was going on right before I turned 18. I thought I was going into the Air Force to be a fighter pilot. And then the draft stopped, and I'm watching the Ukraine and its conscription requirements that people between 18 and 60, I'm 64, and I'm watching the Ukraine talk about conscripting people 18 to 60, and it's like, could I do what is necessary to fend off this kind of an invasion? And so one thing got me thinking about another, and I was chatting with Michelle about her experience as a therapist in working with folks you want to talk about stress at a very high level. This is war, folks. People are dying. People are intending people to be killed. This isn't fun. This is an aggression. And, irrespective of your political stance, people are being hurt who have no need to be collateral damage. Literally, there's no need for this. And so I'm going to take a stance right now and say I am completely opposed to what is going on. And that then led us to a discussion of number one, Michelle and her experience with people coming back from Afghanistan or Africa and the like. And then two, my own experience, which then brought us to a discussion with Christine. I've got family who are from Ukraine. And so we can have that discussion as well if we have some time. But Michelle, within the time constraints that we have, what's your experience with folks and who've been through the latest wars, battles, conflicts, armed aggression that we've seen in the world? And is there something we can do to point them in directions if they don't already know where to get help?
Yeah, so this Middle Eastern conflict that started after New York 9/11 attack on the Twin Towers really has been long, really, really long. So I remember early in my career working with people that were back from the first and second deployments, right? And dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder. And the kind of, so you get back from war, which the details can vary from person to person, what they were exposed to. And you sit in front of, well, this was one person's experience. Your reintegration process is to sit in front of a computer that takes you through a series of kind of educational videos about what trauma is or trauma isn't. And then you get screened on this video with a person that's kind of running through the trauma, and you either hide it, which this person that worked with me much later said most of his colleagues hid their experiences and minimized it because they didn't want to be labeled as crazy or have to go to mandatory psych interventions, and they didn't want to get dismissed. And so there's this, in post-traumatic stress disorder, there's a hypervigilance where you hear a noise and you jump, and the noise can just be pots and pans in the kitchen, or someone closing the door loudly, or a car backfiring outside, or whatever, you hear a siren in the street. It could be any activator that can send someone right back into what's called a flashback, where they're reliving. It's not just that you're remembering, that's a memory, but you're reliving as if you're still at war, and you lose track of time and space and kind of start reliving your memories. So flashbacks are very different than memories. There are traumatic memories. And then the other thing would be sleep deprivation, the training that a soldier has to go through to be able to stay up long hours and be sleep deprived, et cetera. And then there is this, like, I mean, I've met people that still sleep with their gun at night because it makes them feel safe. They struggle with their partner. I mean, imagine rolling over to hug and kiss your partner, and it freaks them out, and they jump away from you and lose track of time, all the way till they're having what's called a night terror, where they're, if you've ever seen somebody blackout drunk, where they don't remember what happened, but they're still functional. So they've rolled over and started choking their partner and fighting their partner. And they're thinking that they're at war. They don't realize they're awake at home in the bed. And so post-traumatic stress disorder can be that. It also can be really mild. It can be a mild insomnia. It can be a mild startle response where you jump in terms of sounds. It can be just a heightened anxiety, difficulty sleeping. So it doesn't have to be severe all the way to the point of flashbacks and immobility. It can be subtle and mild and still need treatment. And one of your best resources for your bibliotherapy people out there is The Body Keeps Score.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so Bessel
Absolutely.
van der Kolk is one of the people that actually got post-traumatic stress disorder listed as a diagnosis in the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual, the DSM. So he wrote that book, The Body Keeps Score. That's an excellent review of the literature. And a brief summary is, he said that of all the research that they've done, massage therapy, yoga therapy, acupuncture, psychotherapy, specifically cognitive behavioral therapy, and eye movement desensitization reprogramming or reprocessing, EMDR therapy, were the main successful forms post 9/11 for people with post-traumatic stress disorder. So those are the types of treatments you'd want to seek. And you can educate yourself. Don't believe me. Go look at the research. Buy that book, The Body Keeps Score.
Yeah, and I work a lot with we just call it the way the body works, right?
Yeah.
And how you store stuff. And anybody who has coached with me at one point or another has heard me say, where do you feel that in your body? What does it feel like? Give it a name. Let's give it a color, and then breathe into it and release. And there's some other things that you can do. And I've got to tell you that the reason I wanted to start, Michelle, with a discussion with you about your experiences with actual people with PTSD and night terrors and all the things you've described is, many of us my age, older and just a little younger, we grew up with bomb drills in school.
Yes.
We grew up with duck and cover. We grew up with literally, I mean, I'm on the West Coast, and Michelle, I know you were for quite a while. I grew up in school with, we were told the Russians were going to come and bomb us.
Cold War time.
And you get under the desk and you put the hand over your head and the hand over your back. And I, you know, in retrospect, I'm going, what the hell would that have done?
I know. I know.
You know, for an earthquake, you go stand under the, we had earthquake drills. We did all these things while we were in school.
Now there's active shooter drills in school,
Yeah.
different subject, but.
And so the reason I say this is, you know, you hear about all this stuff that's going on and we forget how it can activate and trigger
little kiddos and the whole world. Yes.
And it, you know, when we talk about putting together a podcast for a stressed world, after everything that was going on, many of you have heard me in prior shows talk about doing family tree stuff, and I'm having a blast with it. Well, I went back and I'm combing through my head, and I was talking to my sister again. She's a better historian than I am. And we kept coming up with this concept. We kept hearing our family talk about White Russians growing up. Not the drink.
Oh, not the drink. Okay. No. I went there.
And so here's the interesting thing. I went and looked up the term White Russian, what it means. And I'm looking now at familytreemagazine.com. It's in the 18th and 19th centuries. The term White Russian described ethnic Russians living in the area between Russia and Poland, which is today Ukraine, Lithuania, and Latvia. So and from there, I then went and pulled up my family tree. I've always just said Russia. And I've said this before. Germany had invaded Russia. My both sides of the family found paperwork from dead soldiers, took the paperwork, escaped out of Russia. Flat out, just admit what it was. My family has so many different last names, having traveled and done different things. It's hard to track them. And then the interesting thing for me was I went back over the weekend and actually checked to see where some of these folks were born. So my great-grandfather, for example, born in 1882, was born in, and I can't even tell you if I'm pronouncing it right, was born in Ukraine in a place called Kalyus, Kalyus. I've got my other family members in, trying to figure out how to pronounce some of these names again. Grigoropol, I think, Ukraine. And it's amazing how Ukraine keeps showing up now. Back then it wasn't all split up, and that was the interesting thing, Michelle. I'm watching this and I'm seeing where all the conflict is taking place, and in my ignorance, I'll flat out admit it, I like to think of myself as educated, but I saw this map and I had not up until now realized how things have been carved up since the USSR ceased to exist.
Right.
And, you know,
Christine, me too. I definitely have to get better at that.
And Christine, I'm going to bring you in here real quick, if you don't mind. I think you were even saying, if you don't mind, you've got family that originates from this area as well.
My mom. My mom, yes. Wow. But this part of my family moved. I mean, they were also fleeing Ukraine when the Germans came, you know. They moved further down. Yeah, they moved further down south. And then, yeah, I mean, where I was growing up in the eastern part of Germany, right? So because my mom met my father in St. Petersburg, you know, that was former Leningrad.
Right.
So she was growing up in the USSR, basically, you know, in the Soviet Union.
Yes.
So we didn't know the difference, or I didn't grow up with that there is a difference between Russia and all the other countries. No, it was all one thing.
All one thing.
It was all one thing.
Yes, and I was growing up with Russian being basically even my first language. Unfortunately, I forgot everything. Yeah, so what was the point? What was I wanting to say? I forgot what I wanted to say.
I'm curious, Christine, because I know
your connections.
I know that when I'm listening to all these things and realizing Ukraine today is not the Ukraine that my family grew up in. I've seen the pictures. It's just right, it's straight out of Fiddler on the Roof is what it is. You go see those and you watch it. It's a different world. And I'm here on the West Coast hearing about all this stuff. And I wonder, Christine, because your mom grew up there, forget allegiances, forget politics, forget stances. Emotionally, we're talking about who needs coaches, right?
Right. Who needs coaches?
I'm listening to this being activated saying, wait a minute, there's a part of me that says this is part of my family. This is part of my family
Lineage.
being attacked.
Yeah.
Right?
Lineage.
And
yeah.
so do either of you find that same thing where you're taking sides?
Oh yeah, I do.
From an emotional standpoint. I mean, a literally DNA biological family tree. You just attacked my country.
I don't know about Christine.
No, for me, it's like more the justice thing. You know, I mean, this is stuff that's the stuff that's going on. You just don't do that. You know,
Yeah.
I love the Russians. The Russian people have nothing to do with what is going on. It's not their decision. They wouldn't go to war. You know, it's the decision of
the
someone.
People in power. Yeah. Someone in power.
Exactly. And so I don't feel emotionally attacked by, you know, as a genetics,
like by a people.
You know? It's a justice thing that I feel that this is just not okay, you know.
It's not good form.
No, you don't do that.
And by the way,
you
brought up a really good point, Christine, and this will lead us into this discussion about coaching. You brought up a really good distinction that I think is important. It's for me to even realize that as you were talking, and this is the beauty of Christine being a coach, right? The beauty of this is she brought up a perspective that here I am talking about, I felt activated because you attacked my country. What I did not say was, I hate Russians. And I go back to, because I don't actually think like that. I go back to, I'm just going to call it the trauma that we as a country went through during the last set of elections, and that we will likely go through the next set of elections. I know that it's very divisive here in the United States. I don't care who's in the White House. They're not speaking for me. Right. And so when Christine says that it's not the Russians doing this, a lot of times I think we forget worldwide that most people are just like us.
Yeah.
And it was traumatizing for me, frankly, as an employer. I said this before, you know, you go back to when 9/11 happened. I had employees who were Hispanic who were being targeted by people who thought they were Middle Eastern. And I mean, think about that disconnect.
Right.
Because of the color of their skin or the way they looked, or because they spoke with an accent. Suddenly they were being targeted by ignorant people who said, you're part of the 9/11 problem. And it's like, they're Americans. Yeah, Christine.
Can I sum it up in one sentence?
Of course.
People want to be happy. And that's why they could use coaches.
Yeah. So, and I mean, this was a really good, well, the reason I wanted to bring this up, and we'll just segue into the topic today, the reason this was so important, you'll notice that when I was talking, stream of consciousness, top of mind, it took someone like Christine as an objective observer, even though she may have her own emotions involved, as an objective observer, to say, yes, and Russians, it's not a Russian issue.
It's not a Russian issue.
Which then allowed me to take a step back, go, oh, wait, I just kind of like blew over that whole part of it and took it for granted. And so, you know, for me personally, because I have coaches, and I'll flat out say I learned from Michelle and Christine. Michelle has coached me unintentionally on my part. Michelle has coached me when one of my best friends died through grief. And we talked about personal death awareness, and I had no idea that it was hitting me as hard as it was hitting me. So, you know, firsthand from someone who actively looks for coaches and mentors and guides, etc., It gives me a new perspective,
Yes.
and allows me a safe space to talk about things, flush them out,
Yes.
and then flush them out.
Yes.
And I think a lot of the clients that I work with, the people who connect with me, it all begins with, they never thought that they would ever have a life coach or a performance coach,
Right.
a hypnotist or a therapist, because
Right.
I think that at least we here in the West, and Christina, I'd be fascinated to know what you experience over in Belgium and in other, I mean, you're international. I'd be curious, over here, people think they have to endure, suck it up. They have to, no good deed goes unpunished. So they kind of expect that bad things are going to happen. When is the other shoe going to drop? And literally, you have to suffer for your greatness. And I'm sitting back going, who the hell told you have to suffer? and people, there's that disconnect. How about you, Christine? Do you notice that with potential clients? They don't get why they need a coach to begin with?
Yeah, I think this is probably a very common problem at the moment. I think because it's kind of what society tells us we should be, like super strong and powerful at all times, functional. We should be perfect inside and outside. We optimize ourselves all the time. People don't dare to have problems anymore or to talk about those things. They are scared of doing this, and so here it's the same. I think a lot of people think they have to suck it up. Life is hard. They have to work hard for everything, and they shouldn't appear weak ever.
So let's get the elephant out of the room.
Okay.
Because I'm going to tell you first and foremost,
It's not me.
No, I know.
Sorry,
I encounter people who think that going to a therapist, going to a life coach, going to a counselor is weak. It's a weakness. It's a deficit.
I encounter people like that.
Me too.
Sometimes there's a certain segment of the population that feels that way.
So how do you speak to them, Michelle? How do you address the fact that if I go to you as LMFT?
I don't.
Well, but realistically now, let's assume a couple comes to you.
Yes.
Right? You do couples
That's
therapy.
where I get them. Yes,
let's assume a couple comes to you.
Mandatorily coming to me because their parent or their spouse has dragged them in.
And let's assume I'm going to play make believe with you. I'm the husband, and I'm saying she made me come. I don't need you.
Yeah.
This is nothing but there's nothing wrong with me.
Okay. So first of all, you're challenging me because at this stage in my career, I don't work with people that don't want to work with me. And I don't have to. There was a time in my life when I worked in community service and I had probation teenagers and I had mandated clients and I had people there because of child abuse reports against them and things like that. So I have worked with people that don't want to be seeing me, but I no longer do that to myself. And I no longer do that to my clients. It's meaning like if somebody doesn't want to work with me, they need to find another way to spend their time. However, there are consequences. If your wife or your husband are taking you to counseling because they are at their wit's end and might leave you if you don't get some intervention and work on this relationship, you don't have to work with me, but there will be consequences. You can work with another coach or you could just not work at all. So let me
rephrase it. Let me rephrase it then. It's either you get your shit together or there's going to be consequences.
Yes. So, but if I meet somebody in my personal life who maybe, I would say the more common thing is somebody who's kind of curious, but scared. I meet less adamant people because I just don't have people like that in my life. Like it would be like if you were a dentist and you went to a cocktail party and your good friends were like, dentistry is hokey poke and you don't really need dentistry. You just need a good toothbrush and toothpaste and you don't need a dentist take all your money and they don't really care about your teeth. They don't really care. Like, why would that dentist ever spend time with those people? So I don't do that to myself, right?
Fair enough. Christine, do you do the same thing? Is it like you don't work with people who don't want to work with you?
I agree completely with Michelle. Yeah, there's nothing I have to add. I don't. I don't. In the beginning, I thought I should work with everybody that, enters the door.
Yeah, help everybody.
Exactly. But it not only backfires on me, but it
Yeah.
also is not good for the client, and nobody is helped with this at all.
So then let me ask the two of you, and I'm gonna ask the question and I'm gonna answer it first.
Okay.
Just because of time and because the whole point of this particular segment, this podcast session, is to help people, in my head, to help people who aren't already getting coaching to get a coach, right?
Okay.
And it's the question for me is, what, for all of us, what is the most important thing you believe you bring to the table for the client? And I'll start with me, because my fundamental belief is that most of the time we're running bad programs.
Yes.
And so my goal ultimately is to help a client reconnect with their source code and discover themselves again, to connect with whatever they want to call the source code is. That for me is the most important. They may not like me along the way. They may and we're going to get to this question before we're done too. So you guys think about it. And that is, do you become friends with your clients? Don't answer it, but because I know what the two of you are going to answer. I'm a little different, but ultimately my goal for the client is to help them connect with their source code. Okay. Christine, how about you? What is your goal as a coach?
I start with giving them a very safe place to be around. For me, it is extremely important that the person that's coming to me feels like seriously comfortable. They feel accepted. As they turn up in all their pain, they need to be seen, heard, understood, and I give them that space. I think this is massively important, and when they feel so comfortable and they are allowed to be themselves in all their pain and suffering, then change becomes like, it's just like a dance. We are dancing into the change. That's more how I see it, or how it is more for me. And the goal for me is, ultimately, I want to see happy faces. And when they begin to shine and to be happy and to, kind of connect with themselves, I am happy. I mean, I'm genuinely happy. I cry with my clients. I open champagnes with my clients.
Well, that brings us up to, before we get too far into the show, I want to at least tell people you can reach Christine at, of course, happinesscoding.com. and from having spoken with Christine many times off air and getting to know her, I've got to say, she just talked about dancing. She talked about champagne. It is a wonderfully freeing, inviting environment with her. And to use the champagne thing, because I know this is Christine's thing, I think she helps people taste the stars. Which is what champagne actually started off with. We won't get into the whole history of champagne, but it's like, I think, Christine, would that kind of sum up your idea, is to help people experience the champagne of life?
Yes, in the best case, yes. Yeah. Yes, I mean, sometimes people that come to see me, they have lost themselves for years or decades even, and when they find that back, themselves, and for them, this is just priceless. I mean, this is, you can't pay this, really. And but that's one thing. I thought I'm opening up with a story that I had this very morning. I woke up to an email from an old client of mine. And that's also what coaches and therapists and mentors are really good to do. They help you to gain clarity when you have like huge life decisions to make. And this client, she had a huge, massive life decision to make. And for 1 week, she wasn't sleeping and she was carrying it around and talking to friends, talking to family. But friends and family only can go that far, you know.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
so she said to me, and so I had to see you again, because I know you're professional and you look from a distance and you can help me in a different way. And so
Mhm.
we had one session together, and boom, she made the decision. Email this morning, Christine, I'm pregnant.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
Yeah.
yay! Congratulations.
Yes.
I know.
So this is also something we help doing, you know, clarity,
Mhm.
decision making, and all of those things, you know.
How about you,
Mhm.
Michelle? What is the big purpose, goal, the mission
For
for
someone
you?
coming to me.
Not
Okay,
not for
so
the person, for you. What is it
for
that you
me,
want to do for the
what do
client?
I want to do with them? Okay, so I do both coaching and a style of therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, that's got a lot of similarities to coaching. So similar to what Christine said, you know, first of all, a safe space, and then clarity, and then I really love to see my clients feel like they've got me as their accountability partner, because one of the only things that we've shown in social psychology research that causes behavior change is speaking out loud to another person and holding accountability. So having an accountability partner. I want to be their biggest fan. I want to be their accountability partner. I also love to focus on teaching radical self-compassion. So once I've created a safe space for the person, does that apply? So I love when I start to hear them say something like, I was in this really tough situation and I thought, what would Michelle do? Right.
Yeah.
And it's not an ego thing. It's just like, I like to teach my clients how to make healthy decisions to lead to the life that they really enjoy. You know, how do they have a more fulfilling life, relationship, career? And so it's that advocacy and that accountability piece that starts to come, and that self-compassion that starts to come in from, and that's what I seek in a coach or a therapist. Is these are not coffee house conversations that I want to talk about all the time over coffee where other people can overhear me. And that's when a therapist comes into play. And when I go for a coach, it's because I want some targeted direction that helps me build my skill level. So it's kind of two things. Like therapy, I see as self-care, and I just happen to have a therapist. It's also a coach. So it's a nice blend for me. And we move through things like business decisions, personal decisions. We cover the gamut. So anyway, that I would say, like, I'm agreeing with both of you. I want to take care of that old bad scripting and turn that into self-compassion. I want to help provide clarity, that safe space, an accountability partner, and give them tools and resources so they can make these decisions on their own. And I love those happy emails, Christine, like
Yeah. So
like, oh, this just happened. Yay!
I'm gonna piggyback on that, because I will tell you one of the most gratifying things that I can hear is when, and Christine is actually, we know a mutual friend who's said this, so she knows what I'm talking about. When someone comes back to me and says, I asked, what would Scott do?
Yes.
And then I made a fearless decision, and they use the word fearless, right? So it's, you know, fearless is a big deal for me in the stuff that I do, because of the fire I walked through. And when I hear those terms, it's just very gratifying, which then leads to the next question. For the two of you, how important is it that, you know, you've moved beyond theoretical, we've all got that, that you as a coach or a therapist have actually had the problems, you've actually experienced your own trauma, dark night of the soul, whatever it is, night terrors. How important do you think it is for people to find a coach who actually walks the talk? Now, Christine, why don't you go first?
Christine go first.
Yeah, time to think, for you.
Plus, I can just go ditto what she said. It was so good.
Okay, can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, the question really is this. Let me do it simple. Let me make it simpler. If you're looking for a coach, how important is it that you find a coach, a therapist, a counselor who actually has gone to their own coach, counselor, et cetera, because they've had issues they want to deal with, and they've worked through the process as a participant rather than it just being theoretical?
I think this is a very, very interesting question. I saw this post the other day on Twitter where somebody who I'm following was thinking to become a life coach and was asking the general public.
It's easy for you to say.
What they think about life coaching, does it make sense? Are they useful? Whatever. And the response was overall really, really negative. And most people said something along those lines like, they don't have their own shit together. They don't have their own life together. And I believe, honestly, I have been through different therapists, coaches, mentors over the past 20 years. Yeah. And some were better than others. I had more value from some than from others, but all of them were very valuable at that point in time where I was, it's different things. But what I want to say, I'm coming to answer the question. I believe that we are never a finished end product. Life is always happening. We are also living life. We are not perfect creatures. We go through stuff, and we will continue to go through stuff, but we have also been somewhere, and we have learned stuff, and we have experiences. My old therapist that I love so much, she said something: being a therapist or a coach is one of the rare professions where getting older is a plus.
Yes.
Oh, you know
True.
what? I have told people who've come to me who want to be life coaches, and they're in their 20s and 30s, seriously. And I said, you know what? I earned this gray hair. I earned it, and you can't take it from me.
Mine's dyed blonde, but yes.
How about you, Michelle? How important do you think it is for someone to have been in the middle of the fire, been in the middle of the storm, and they walked out the other side, or they're in the process of walking out, and that is part of the coaching that they bring to the table?
Okay, so it's a two-part answer for me, because I don't think every coach or therapist has to have had personal experience with every problem that someone brings to you.
Oh, I agree.
I do
with
not
that.
think that.
I totally
do not
agree.
think that. I think you can find an excellent brain surgeon who's never had brain surgery. Okay. But I do think that there is something vital about holding yourself accountable as a coach or a therapist, that you wouldn't ask your clients to do something you're not willing to do yourself. So if you're not willing to go see a coach or a therapist ever, and you have some ego in the way about it, why are you expecting your clients to come to you? Because I don't think I ever give an intervention or a suggestion, at least not without a lot of caveats, to someone that I haven't personally experienced myself. Meaning, like, I might have gone for a different reason to EMDR, but I actually have had some EMDR. So if I recommend EMDR, I know the process and I can walk my client through it. So I do think it is vital and I think it's very vital for coaches and therapists to have their own source, because we get activated in a way, like one client annoys us or one client brings up our own stuff. And if we're not clean, we're going to make that session more about us and talk too much about us, because we don't have a proper outlet. So you better go get a proper outlet. I'm kind of snooty about that. And I do think, I've always thought, even before coaches kind of were on the scene, so way back in the 90s, I have always felt like the best therapists have had a lot of their own therapy. Now, they aren't currently necessarily going through something that doesn't allow them to be present for me, because that's super important. Is, you got to make the client session about the client and not about the practitioner, right? If you're talking too much about your own problems, unless it's a short snippet of how you worked your way through something and what worked for you, you might need to get yourself your own outlet and resource and journal a little more. So I kind of have an attitude about it. I apologize.
No, you don't have to apologize.
I completely agree.
You don't have to apologize. You don't have to apologize at all. The reason I ask this is you know, and I've had these discussions, by the way, off air with Michelle and Christine. It's very interesting for me when a potential client comes and, you know, Alcohol Anonymous, we've talked about AA, and we've done many shows on habits and addictions. I believe I was looking up where the source of this came from, and I haven't been able to find it, but I use with my own clients the quote, "Your best thinking got you here."
Yes.
Your best thinking isn't going to get you out of it. And so one of the things that I think is important is for a coach, consultant, therapist, you know, to be able to bring to the table the understanding of the process, even though they haven't gone through the same problem or obstacle. They understand the process. And, you know, I've had many, again, counselors, I've had therapists, I've had, you know, you name them.
Right.
And there's something during a process where suddenly you, as the client, you get this freaking aha moment that no amount of reading a book will do for you.
Right.
And no amount of listening to the therapist teach you.
Yeah.
It's the process. And the reason it's so important for me that we've all gone through our shit and continue to go through it is that we understand the process of, I'll use my thing, the process of getting to know your source and how far away you are from who you were, so that you can say, I'm not that. Go ahead, Christine.
On top, I mean, I think we all know this. It's always easier to help someone else than oneself.
Absolutely. And sometimes it's easier said than done. That's true statement. Easier said than done.
Well, so that brings me to my big question. And I think we're going to disagree here, which is okay. And that is this whole concept, and it starts with therapist-patient distancing, that your therapist is not your friend. And yet I'm a coach, I'm not a therapist. I am friends with my clients. I've always, from day one, no matter what business I'm in, no matter what I'm doing, one of my goals internally is to make friends with them. Now, I happen to know flat out, Christine, you and Michelle disagree with me. Yes?
Yes.
So Christine, go. How do you explain that process? So you're not a paid friend, which, by the way, I have heard therapists and counselors described by other people.
Sure.
It's like, I'm not going to them. They're just a paid friend. How do you view yourself, Christine, when you're working with a client?
When I was starting out, I was starting more on the therapy side than on the coaching side. So I know how it is as a therapist. You're not supposed to be friends. You know, you really need to be distance personally, you know, emotionally distance. But you know, I encountered clients I fell in love with. Well, right?
No,
and
I know what you mean.
I wanted to be friends with them, but I would never have said that anyway, you know. But some clients proposed friendship and wanted to be friends after we were done working together. And it's still a difficult thing for me, honestly. It's difficult. I like it because I wanted to, but it's difficult.
Yeah.
Michelle, and Michelle, I know you actually said, well, you've said it on air.
I have.
You could not be my therapist.
I absolutely could not be your therapist because I am your friend. I could be your coach, though. I do feel like coaching is a little bit different in that coaching can be very problem focused for a short period of time. Like I could consult and I could coach with somebody for a short period of time, and they could be my friend. But with therapy, usually there's something mental health related in there, and the kinds of things that people share with me create a power dynamic where I know a lot about them and they don't need to know about me because they're not my therapist, right? Like I said, I don't share about myself in that way as a therapist because the session is for them. So, but I will say I'm somewhere in between. Like the only way I can work with a client, this is why I don't have clients that come in the room and are like, what are you going to do for me? You know, whippersnapper. I'm like, well, I'm going to tell you to go out the door. But because I can only work with people that I can find a way to love them and really like them. And that's different for me at this stage. So I actually do, like Christine, I kind of fall in love with my clients. I am their biggest cheerleader. I am their advocate. I, of course, want to challenge them to grow. So I don't just sugarcoat everything, but I definitely want to be, I want to fall in love with them. And if I had met them in, there's so many people in my practice that if I had met them in a different arena, I would have loved to be friends, but that would have been, I listen and you share, you listen and I share. And it develops as an equal, like Scott, you and I developed as an equal friendship where we both share and we both listen and we both problem solve together. But therapy isn't set up that way. It's set for the therapist to have all this private information about the client, childhood trauma, sexual abuse, like stuff you don't tell people about except your therapist. And now your therapist has all this information about you and you don't have any of it about your therapist. And it's an imbalance of power.
Well, shit. I just want to be friends with everybody.
Totally. I love
Christine.
them.
When the imbalance of power,
you don't like that term. Okay.
No, because for me, it's not about power when we work together. It's like a partnership. It's like teamwork for me. And so even though I know a lot about them and they know nothing about me, when we kind of move into a friendship, because it's also not, like something you just decide.
Right. Absolutely.
Then I also share, then it's like a friend. But then I have the problem, even if they would then like to work with me, I can't take money from them.
Yes. No, I can't take money from my friends.
So everybody make friends with Michelle and Christine. You'll get free therapy and counseling. Which by the way,
this is why I'm picky about my friends.
And I don't have that issue. So it's an interesting discussion that we're having here.
Scott will take your money whether you're his friend or not. Is that what you're saying?
Well,
Scott doesn't have a problem
because
money.
I value because I value my time. I value your time.
Absolutely.
And what I'm doing as a coach, I'm not a therapist. What I'm doing as a coach is I'm being your friend and at the same time being your cheerleader, being your kick in the ass, being your accountability partner, et cetera, et cetera. I can do that with a friend. Because I can compartmentalize. I can, and maybe it's my lawyering for all those years where, a client, I was friends with all my clients, and that doesn't change the fact that I can't take a problem that they had, set aside my emotions, look at it strategically, tactically, and logically, and say, here's the war room analysis. Here's the next thing that's going to kill you. Here's how we're going to prevent it, et cetera, et cetera. So I come at it with a little different approach, but we're all saying the same thing, and maybe this is a good way to sum up here, and that is the best athletes in the world, the best performers in the world all have coaches. I doubt you're going to find somebody who, Kobe Bryant had a coach.
That's right.
CEOs
have coaches.
Astronauts have people. Story Musgrave, who was one of my mentors, and I've learned a lot from this man. Most hours in space of anybody ever. And he and I were talking on the phone once, and I said, how did you go through your process? And he would, when he was practicing for spacewalking, go into a pool underwater, all the equipment on. And before he went underwater, he said to every single part of the support team, your job is this. Watch what I'm doing. If at any time you think I'm making a misstep, or if there's something wrong, or you see something I don't, tell me and I will stop immediately and we will reassess. And that has really meant a lot for me when you think about walking in space being life and death. And that's what we do as coaches, even though it might be not as dramatic, that we as therapists, coaches, et cetera, bring the ability to say to a friend and or an objective arm's length client, you might want to rethink this. Maybe this is something for you to explore. And I mean, I don't know about you guys. I give homework when I work with people. Here's something for you to process and work through. So the show's gone very quickly. There's a lot to chat about. Christine, is the best place for people to get a hold of you is through happinesscoding.com?
Yes, and I have a new stellar website.
Ooh, I gotta
wonderful.
go back and visit.
And
Your last one was no chopped liver.
I've actually looked at this and it's phenomenal. It really, she's done a marvelous job with this.
Yes, there are little bits and pieces we still have to tackle, but it's there. It's there. I love it. I'm in love with my own website.
That's wonderful.
Hey,
Yeah, just to look at it. I sometimes just look at it.
I love it. I love it. Make friends with your website.
Michelle, if people want therapy and or coaching from you, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
I would start with postinternationalinc.com. And if you're in California, we could consider mental health counseling. If you're not, we got to work on the coaching aspect of things.
And you can find my stuff at thinkingmagically.com. We're at the end of the show next week, by the way, and Michelle touched on this. Next week, we're going to be talking about how to be happy for others, not for yourself. And so this kind of brings in the concept of Michelle and Christine celebrating the successes and wanting the victories and wanting the happiness for the client. How do you actually do that? So Michelle and I are going to be chatting about that next week. Christine, is there anything you want to end the show on today as far as talking about whether people need, how they should process, or even whether they should have a coach? Anything you want to end on?
No.
Okay, there you go.
This is not the yes and of improv. No.
While it's all funny, I do want to say all three of us, by the way, are now on Zoom because of everything that's gone on. And it's been a wonderful transition.
Yeah.
And so the beauty of this is we have an international market now, an international fan base. And I want to thank all of you for doing that. You can work with any of us or someone else wherever you are in the world. And that's the beauty of it. And I'm going to end with the realization, I always worked one-on-one and live and in groups and in these events. I'm finding out that working online is just really satisfying and you get as many results. And so Christine, are you noticing that too, that working online is just as effective?
Absolutely, because you take your mind everywhere you go, whether you are sitting in my office or in your living room, your mind is still there. So that's why we can do the same work with the same result.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Michelle, same thing for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I love working online with clients. I can see more people than who could get to me during rush hour in Los Angeles.
All right. With that, I want to thank our featured guest, Christine Phillip.
Yay.
Please reach out to her. Go look at her new website at happinesscoding.com. Let her know what you think of the show. Let us know what you think of the show. And through your favorite podcast platform, please like or subscribe so that we can continue to do what we're doing. Michelle, anything you want to end on?
Nope. Just lots of love to all of you out there and peace.
Yeah. May the world find some equilibrium again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
And with that, thank you, everybody. And we will chat next week. Bye-bye.
You've reached the end of another episode of Keeping Your Together in a Stressed World with Michelle Post and Scott Grossberg. If you like our show, we'd love for you to subscribe, rate our broadcast, and leave a review. The podcast is for general information only and not intended to be legal or mental health advice, nor the formation of a lawyer-client, nor therapist-patient relationship. Stay tuned for our next episode, and thank you for listening.